Attachment wounds often form in our earliest relationships, leaving invisible scars that can shape how we connect, trust, and show up in love. These wounds don't just disappear, they follow us, especially in Cassandra relationships and neurodiverse partnerships, where misunderstanding and emotional disconnect can amplify old pain. In this episode, we'll unpack what attachment wounds are and how they are created, how they show up in neurodiverse dynamics, inner child and internal family systems inspired tools for healing, and what secure attachment actually feels like in your body. Whether you're on a journey to heal your own attachment patterns or supporting a person who is, this episode offers both practical and spiritual guidance to help you rewire for connection, safety, and wholeness. I'm Leann Herron, a certified life and health coach and transformation coach for women. I am a passionate advocate for women's health and empowerment, specializing in helping women break free from the cycle of overgiving and the stories that keep them stuck. My co-host is Lisa Anzaldua, a holistic psychotherapist, spiritual coach, and neurodiverse couples counselor who is transforming lives with her deep and integrative approach to healing and personal power. Lisa specializes in helping clients heal trauma, navigate neurodiverse relationships, and resolve general patterns. Lisa, I'd love to start with how can you help us understand what attachment wounds actually are and how are they created?
Okay, yeah. So I'm gonna describe it more experientially so that it can be felt from that perspective. So I'm gonna invite everyone to think of it this way. So we're born, and whatever our environment, whatever is present in our environment that is nurturing our survival, forms our attachment. It also forms, so it's rooted in, the point being that it's rooted in attachment, it's rooted in survival, inherent to the human experience. And we also associate that survival with love. Okay, so that this is why in future relationship dynamics as adults, attachment and love kind of work simultaneously in context of mind-body complex. And so if you think of it this way, so and I know we're going right into that question is regarding the wounds that occur. Think of it as any threat to the well-being of your own being as wounds. So for instance, the absence of the caregiver, the person that's sustaining your survival, when you're, when you're a infant and you're crying, the natural life-giving thing would be to have that presence respond to that and nurture it. The absence of that leads to developmental stage. In that developmental stage, the experience of the absence of what was needed for survival. This is why, as adults, when we are attached to people, for instance, something as simple. So let me back up. Fear formulates the felt sense of abandonment. Okay, and this is why, and I'm not saying it always unfolds this way. I'm just giving an example. This is why in the future, in our adult relationships, we have this proclivity to feel abandonment, even sometimes at the slightest. We text and they don't respond within a time frame. That those same emotions, that same felt sense can reoccur and is projected on the present circumstance. This is why it's important to undo, so to speak. There's two things happening when we heal. We don't just superimpose ways of being, affirmations, in order to change, we have to undo what has previously occurred as being wounded, the layers. So there's a bit of an unbecoming and then a becoming, so to speak, which I'll get into a little bit with respect to healing, right? Yeah, so that's essentially how they're created. So I could go in a little bit more detail, but just important to know that what I said, so integrated with survival and the absence of what is needed in response to needs being met to nurture that survival equals the wound.
Where I connect with what you're saying, I was adopted, and my general understanding about my adoption was that I was adopted from an orphanage at 3 months old, and I had a lot of medical issues with my legs. And so I think, as I grew up, I don't know if it was just knowing that information or if it was actually that attachment that I lacked, that nurturing, that safety, that it led to me having serious abandonment issues throughout my entire life. Even like you said, as simple as sending somebody a text and not getting a response, and having that really show up in that attachment style.
Yeah, that would explain a lot, Leann. Sure would.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a good example to use, and it's nice to know that you've been able to heal that. Oh, that's the work. That's the work we're here to do, right?
Yeah. Finding ways to self-soothe, finding ways to not rely on external resources and validations for me to feel safe. That's been my work, learning those tools.
Love it. Number one, nervous system. Attend to your nervous system, which is exactly what you said. Learn the tools and techniques to regulate your nervous system. It's so fundamental. And the second thing you mentioned, it's not outside of me, it's within me. That is significant. That's exactly the truth. And when we're in that, if we haven't yet learned to regulate the nervous system, or we're in that pattern, it's so hard to hear. It's so hard to know that that is the truth. You've experienced it. Now you know that it's all within you, and it's true for every single person. And that's actually some could say that the reason why we come into this life experience with the inevitability of these wounds is to discover that it's actually everything we need is truly, it emanates from within and is projected. It's projected outward and then mirrored back to us, everything that we have within our consciousness and our being, our mind, body, spirit complex. I'm glad you said that.
Thank you. Was there more that you wanted to cover in that, or do we want to go into kind of our next topic, which is, go ahead.
Yeah, I think we could just move along. I feel like I could get into the weeds there. I think if everyone were listening to this and remembered what I said in the beginning, it'd be able to make sense in other, in more detail and aspects of their own personal life.
Okay, so let's take it a step further. I know that many of our listeners are navigating relationships where neurodiversity plays a role, whether it's autism, ADHD, or other neurological differences. Can you speak to how attachment wounds tend to show up in neurodiverse dynamics?
Yeah. Well, so we have to consider the nature nurture aspect of neurodivergence. Let's use ASD, autism spectrum disorder specifically. Well, we can talk about both actually. So inherent neurological differences, yes. Environmental influences, yes. And when I say that, that is to say that it's the classic, which I've witnessed with all of my clients in many circumstances. It's not always half and half. It's not always that, by all means. So there's, if I take a pool of people, I would say with that have these neurological differences, I'd say some of them, it's completely neurological and not, well, I can't say completely, but less influenced on environmental interactions, attachments, and that sort of thing. And then there's the other pool where it's the opposite. And then there's some that are right there in the middle. And when I say that, just more up an environment where emotional expression is accepted, where attunement is natural by their caregivers, coming back to attachments, attunement is natural. The child, that means that the parent, the caregiver can feel into when a child is misbehaving. They know, oh, it's because they're tired, and sometimes, and if that isn't understood, if the nurturers, the caregivers are not attuning to those things, then that child develops this way of being and concept of self, and a disallowance of emotions, and they become split, and kind of those emotions become repressed, and the concept and felt sense of emotionality is reduced as a survival mechanism. So, so I'm saying that to say that if you were to follow that pattern forward, let's say in a contained, this is never the case, but hypothetically, if it's all nurture, that one is neurodiverse because as a result of that nurturing or lack there, it would actually be a lack thereof, then that's how that would unfold, so lack of attunement, therefore inability to develop the understanding of emotional expression, and the immense degree of repression of the emotional body is such such a natural aspect of one's human existence, and that in order to survive, that sometimes would need to survive in an environment. In other words, maintain life in an environment where parents cannot attune and not be receptive. They would therefore have to repress that in order to continue forward. And to survive, literally, and in general. So that this becomes a part that then is so deeply repressed that then the personality and other aspects of the being kind of build up around that. And I'm speaking in such general terms here for sake of brevity and all of that. So I apologize for being so, this isn't actually true to the extent that I'm talking about it. I'm giving an extreme example. Okay, so that then could lead to the markers that define autism, the social discomfort and difference in interacting in social dynamics, being able to see and read others' emotional expressions and to naturally attune. The theory of mind is to step into that person's experience and see from their lens, and the inability to do that, right, would then kind of unfold. This is again very general. And then we have the natural proclivity, so simply the neurological differences, and there are factors that contribute to that are outside of my scope of expertise. I understand them generally, but it's not my area of scientific focus, and there are resources for that. But so where I'm going with this is to say, so let's say we took that person A, which I described as growing up in an environment where emotion was not allowed. And if it was actually reprimanded or either ignored or received hurt in response to emotional. So that's abuse, right? And both are in their own way. And also their own beingness wasn't mirrored back to them. So, as we develop our caregivers now, we can see ourselves through them, how they project us in their eyes, for instance. And let's say that is absent. So then there isn't really a sense of self. Okay. So in their attachment experience, they've learned that emotionality is to be ashamed of and not known, and completely ignored. But naturally, the human being is emotion. So this person must have had to repress that and then associate it as there's just an affiliation, an association of it being wrong. Okay, so I'm just going to use one example because this could get so convoluted, not convoluted, but this can get a little bit too in the weeds. But let's just take that one example, fast forward into adulthood. And let's say that this person has some of the markers for autism. And then they're interacting with their allistic neurotypical partner. That partner is expressing emotion. The autistic partner learned to repress the understanding of what that emotive expression is in themselves and the other person. Yet their partner keeps asking for something. Can you imagine the shame, the sense of, so their partner is asking them to see when they actually cannot see, for example. And that becomes for the autistic person, can you imagine the pressure? That could feel like immense criticism. That could feel like no matter what I do, I fail, So that's one way it shows up in a neurodiverse dynamic for the autistic partner. Again, I'm giving just one tiny example. And for the holistic neurotypical partner, one would say that, and I work with thousands of women in this regard, and there is a common thread. So we have to ask, isn't it interesting that we have, as a neurotypical, yet I find myself drawn to this relationship and the wounds that are reoccurring over and over for me, the neurotypical, is that my partner cannot feel me. I feel that they can't feel me. I feel that they're not attuning to my needs. I feel that they are abandoning me every single day. I feel that no matter what I say, it's not received. So imagine that person's experience, and I almost always, not always, but almost always, I can understand that, was this a pattern in some form or fashion in your life growing up? Because remember what I said in the beginning, our definition of love, the subconscious nervous system definition of love, is that which our paradigm of reality in our childhood. And therefore we're drawn to that inevitably, subconsciously, drawn to that in adulthood. And so now we've got that person, that neurotypical, bringing all that stuff, so to speak, that they haven't resolved, and so that of course their partner is going to trigger that deep sense of abandonment and that sort of thing that is present there. So yeah, so I think that feels complete without rambling on and on.
Yeah, and it was actually very informative from my perspective, being that child left unattended, not nurtured. And as I grew up, that lack of being able to connect my emotions to other people, or being able even to communicate, the lack of being able to connect because of how much safety I had, lack of safety I had growing up. And I loved how you explained, person A versus their partner, and person A, feeling this great sense of shame for what they can't do, what's just not within them to be able to do, and that they can't provide that for their partner. And then the other partner wanting it so desperately, but thinking, why can't they just give me what I need? Somehow you've muted.
Oh,
There we go.
oh, this is better. Yeah.
Yep. So let's
Yeah,
take
I was saying exactly.
the next part of that, which is, can you share how like inner child work and internal family systems, how those tools can help us begin to heal those wounds?
Yeah. Okay. Okay. And I'm going to preface this with, there is some research that I'm recently doing regarding neurodivergent ASD folks, autism spectrum, that this isn't true in their experience. And this is coming from somebody who is, I respect this perspective because it's from somebody who is a expert in the field, who's also neurodivergent. So I trust that. So I'm going to set aside my perspective for the time being of the neurodivergence experience of this. It may resonate for some, it may not, who may listen to this, who are neurodivergent. So I'm not going to speak from a full knowing. I am neurodivergent and it rings true for me, but having listened to this recently, this research that I've done, then I'm kind of stepping back from that perspective a little bit. But nevertheless, I'll go into IFS and how it can influence and help us heal our attachment wounds. So really it's the okay, so I'll start from our developmental stages. So we have a core self, life-giving. I could go into the energy centers and all that, but this is for the sake of not, keeping it confined. Let me just keep it kind of contained. So we're in the world from that whole place, right? And then we experience life, and we experience these hurts, these wounds that I just described as the absence of what is needed for the life-sustaining being, or the direct abuse attributed, enforced upon that person. Okay. And each time these occur, when there isn't a resolution, essentially bringing the nervous system and mind understanding of what's occurred to a place of homeostasis, we split into the consciousness splits into kind of becomes its own contained personality with its own interpretation of themselves when that occurrence happened. Their own interpretation of themselves so for instance, someone is 5 years old, there's an attachment wound that occurs, that then no resolution, that then kind of becomes a sub-personality, let's say, where it maintains that same perceptual reality of that age, that same level of consciousness and awareness and felt sense and belief system that person had when they were 5, and now it's there. Okay. So now they're two kind of aspects of themselves. And now imagine that happening hundreds of times, and some are bigger and some are more impactful in our sense of self in the present day than others are. So now we are, let's say, in that regard, there's about 8 or 9 or 10 kind of really significant parts of ourselves that are at different ages in their perception of things, different felt sense and belief systems. Now, here we are and as a whole person, and yet we find ourselves being triggered in certain circumstances, and we kind of revert back to that original age when whatever trigger that's sparking, whatever felt sense, let's go back to the abandonment. The ability to understand it from that in the present moment is also from the lens of a 5-year-old in the body and the nervous system and the way they're feeling about what's happening. And this is why people say, and we've witnessed in other people when they are having in a triggered state, we say, oh, that's childish, or they're acting like a child, or, there's reasons for that. Or we ourselves feel like a child because we feel like a child because this is bringing up something that happened when we were 5 and haven't yet been able to integrate our higher knowing and adult consciousness into that experience as a child. So internal family systems is your internal family. So you can think of all these parts as your family, a family of oneself. So now what we do is we attend to our higher consciousness self, attends to that part that is hurt. Let's say you just got triggered and let's say the way you reacted, we always react kind of secondary, how we reacted in the time to cope. Let's say you reacted, so let's say, this is so stupid, but not stupid. I shouldn't say stupid because this actually happens to all of us. Or not all of us, but this, depending on our wound. You text somebody that you don't hear back from them and you get anxious and then you start to feel that they're abandoning you. Sometimes let's say that when that's triggering something we felt when we were 5, or original experience of that, then kind of momentum built around that for the rest of our life. Now, let's say the way we reacted when we were 5 is that we got really angry. Let's just say that that's the case. Usually it's because we're so hurt, we don't know how to cope. And let's say that then, we kind of, we lashed out. We may do that now as an adult. And instead of when we look back in retrospect and say, gosh, I acted with anger, shame on me, that's not who I am. Instead of berating yourself, actually go to yourself and say, oh, I see that you're hurt. You acted angry because that is deeply, deeply painful. You're terrified, you're scared. And then meet that yourself, with that degree of love and understanding, as if you would to a child who's 5 years old and is acting angry. You attune to them. They're acting that way because something else must be going on. And you do that for yourself. So you bring love to every single aspect of yourself. You bring love to the part that is hurt, the vulnerable part, and you bring love to the part that's protecting, i.e. anger, that vulnerable part. And that's how a short synopsis really is, that's the process for, like some call it reintegration or reclaiming the self. You're reclaiming these parts of yourselves through the power of love,
Wow. Thank you for explaining it like that. That actually made a lot of sense. It made a lot of sense to me. It kind of took me back to a time when I did do that work and went back and sat with my younger self who was feeling all of those emotions and those hurts, and was able to show that part of myself, show that 7-year-old self the love that she didn't receive. And it was very powerful. So thank you so much for sharing that as a tool that is available, that people can learn by working with a professional to begin to heal those attachment wounds.
Right. And you are your own healer. You can begin to do that for your own self. Mm-hmm.
We're about at time. How are you doing? We had one more thing we wanted to talk about.
Oh yeah, that should be fine. Yeah, just a few more minutes would be great. Mm-hmm.
Okay, so what does secure attachment actually feel like in the body? You kind of described the emotional attachment, but what does it feel like in the body?
It feels like peace and secure, and it feels like peace. It feels like inspiration because there's a degree of confidence. So when we are young and we have a secure attachment with our attachment figures, that provides the platform from which we can individuate out into the world as an autonomous being, when we have that sense of I'm always protected and safe, and it gives that being the stability in their nervous system and sense of self to know that they can venture out into the world and be safe. When the absence of that is there, they have this idea, their nervous system is dysregulated, and they've also been taught that the paradigm of life, of the world, is to be feared. So why would they extend themselves and all of their authenticity and confidence in the world if that's been their paradigm? They wouldn't. So that's the work we do. That's why we do this healing work, and why it's so powerful, because you become more of your self, because you're creating that safe base for yourself through the healing work, which I could go into more detail. I know we'll do more sessions and I'll talk about, really, it's beyond IFS, internal family systems. But okay, so now to answer your question, so say a secure attachment, what that feels like is self-expression and confidence and a merging with life, knowing that you're always safe. You're not afraid of the world. You're not afraid of other people. You trust with discernment, with your heart, but with wisdom, not an overly, just, I'm going to go into, so yeah, so it's really, it's that.
Okay, so peace, inspiration, a sense of safety and safe in your environment, confidence to be able to go out and know that you are safe, that it's okay to leave your space, and trust, the ability to trust yourself and trust others.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, thank you for going into that. I think that is important for people to understand through the work. This is what's on the other side, that we can work through those wounds. Even at 50 years old, working through the wounds of our 5-year-old self, our 10-year-old self, our teenage self, and be able to heal those wounds and feel safe in our current world and moving forward. So thank you so much for really going into detail with all of those areas.
Yeah, and I just want to lastly say that, so what I just described as the safe attachment, secure attachment, is also, you can, that is your actual nature. That's beyond the stories and experiences. Your core nature is secure attachment with the universe, with God, with source. There is always there's something greater than you that's encompassing you, as part of you, and is bigger than you, holding space for you, holding you. And so sometimes, the healing process includes that revelation, that knowing in your being, because if we've not gotten it from our caregivers, we come to know it from source. So no matter what your circumstances are, relationships are in the present moment, you can find that with source.
Thank you so much for bringing that up and mentioning that as well. I've definitely moved closer to that. More recently, I had some struggles with faith, and not necessarily my beliefs in God or the universe or source, but more in religion. And so knowing that within myself, and that I can trust in that power greater than myself, that has nothing to do with maybe the wounds I inherited through childhood, through religion, through those belief systems that there is truly something greater than me that is protecting me and will keep me safe, and just to trust in that and have faith in that.
Exactly.
So I want to thank you for your time again, Lisa. This was a great topic. I think a lot of people are going to benefit from it. If people want to learn more about you or me, I'll make sure and include everything in the show notes, as well as links to our previous episodes. We did the truth about self-love, becoming your own healer. So make sure you check out those links as well. And, I just, again, want to thank you for your time, Lisa. I think this was a very important topic.
Thank you, Leann. I appreciate that. I appreciate your time.